I'll mute.
Good morning, participants. As you come in, we'll start in 4 minutes. But it's very good to have you.
Good morning, Eckhart. Eckhart,
Hi,
good morning.
Hi there,
How
good
are
morning.
you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
I'm trying to
You
make
have to
you-
assign me.
Yeah, I know, I don't find the button. I thought you'd be assigned directly.
No, you have to assign me when I join. Okay. Do you have the interpretation globe at the bottom of your screen?
Yes, here it is. Thank you.
When I'm assigned, you won't be able to hear me unless you choose one of the channels, okay?
Good morning. Hi, Renee. Hi, Adriana.
Hello.
Good to see you both.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi there, we can hear you well.
Hello.
Hi
Hello.
there.
Hello. This
Morning,
is.
Renee.
How are you?
Good, good. It's very good to see you.
Thank you.
So we're waiting for Dylan.
Eckhart, I'm not assigned yet. Bonjour tout le monde.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I don't know why, to be honest.
Bonjour.
Do you see the interpretation globe at the bottom of your screen?
I did. Yeah, I did. And I click Mireille.
You have, yeah, but you have to
Arabic.
click on launch or start or something like this.
I did that too. Is it working now? Mireille? Really? Is it working now? Great, translation is online as well. Very good. All right, so let's get started on time then. A very good morning to all. My name is I'm theological advisor at Danmission at the Mena office in Beirut, and I welcome you very much to this. Sorry, no, I still had the Arabic on. That was fun. I welcome you very much to this webinar. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're very excited about what we have to present, what we have found in these very unusual times. Let me not lose much time, but just give a very, very brief introduction. So we'll be discussing how the topic of faith-based actors in the MENA respond to the corona pandemic. And the point of departure is an external learning review that we initiated within Danmission's Danish Arab Partnership program, which is supported by the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the background is that the Danish Arab Partnership program is a political reform program that cultivates Danish interest and wants to promote democratic, prosperous, and stable Middle East and North Africa. And Danmission has been part for this program since 2012, and together with highly esteemed partners, we work for three things: the promoting of rights-based societies through specific initiatives in inclusive citizenship, peaceful coexistence, and religious freedom; B, preventing violent extremism; and C, enhancing interfaith networks and relationships within the MENA and across the MENA and Denmark through intercultural platforms and partnerships. This with projects in Egypt, Jordan, and also regional projects reaching out to thousands of people. So with this study, we wish to emphasize on the past 9 months and put an emphasis on the past 9 months and how the COVID-19 situation has impacted the four organizations that we work with in this program. And we just saw how they've been adapting and doing their utmost to wrestle with this situation that has been affecting us all. And we had two basic questions: what adaptations there have been, and secondly, what new discourses have emerged. We will stream this webinar to Facebook. So for all attendees, the default is that your video is off and you are muted. You should be able to rename yourself, and there will be a Q&A later in written form. With this, I will introduce Stephen and Jasmine, our two consultants, colleagues who have been putting together this report that's being presented today, and who also had the discussions and interviews with our partners. So Dr. Stephen Van Houten is a humanitarian development advisor with 28 years of experience, and he's been leading many assessments and studies with a great number of donors, including Danish Danida. And Stephen is joining us from Cape Town today, and I'll give the floor to him in just a minute. And Ms. Jasmine Diab is currently at the research associate in the Global Health Institute at the American University of Beirut, and she has also served at the Lebanon Dialogue Initiative and was an invited fellow at the Kaisid International Fellows Program in 2016, and she's joining us from Beirut with a wonderful internet connection, which we are all very grateful for. And with this, just
great, thanks, Eckhard. Good day, everyone. Really, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Jasmine and myself are really happy and to be here. What we will be doing is just going over some brief findings from our learning review, and then we're going to have a panel discussion for about half an hour just to start discussing and illuminating some of the main themes that came out, and then we will have a half an hour Q&A session. So that's more or less what it'll look like in terms of process. So please, we welcome your active contributions and questions and comments in the Q&A session. So let's maybe start. Eckhart, I'm going to start with the share screen just to make sure we're seeing that. How is that? Can you see? It's
Yes.
That's there. Okay, great.
That's good.
All right, good. All right, so let me just see that I can change pages. Sometimes it gets stuck. Oh, there we go. Hold on. I'll go back. Okay, good. So we're just going to start with a brief background to the learning review. My thanks to the 4 organizations. We will be introducing them and their representatives in a few minutes' time. We'd like to thank all 4 organizations and of course Danmission for the opportunity. Thank you for being here today as part of this process. As Eckhart said, the basic background was really to assess how partners have adapted to the restrictions and the difficulties resulting from Corona. And it was really to explore how this can also help inform any sort of future learning in the region and for other organizations and other partners as well. In terms of the 3 specific objectives, we were really looking at what adaptations had taken place. So we asked partners about some of the positive and the negative adaptations. We also asked questions, a series of questions about the new discourses, the emerging themes that have come out as a result of COVID adaptations. And then, of course, we were also trying to understand a little bit of how organizations have been documenting these learnings, sharing these learnings, and also how has it influenced any way that the organizations have learned so far. As Eckhart said, just the 2 questions that guided our series of questions was really looking at what could be learned from the adaptations in question 1, and then question 2, looking at what new topics and discourses have emerged from that. And we had a series of questions underneath those 2 questions to help us understand that in more details. So what we have done is we've organized these findings according to those 2 questions so that you could have a good sense of that as well. And Eckhart, I'm assuming we will share this presentation with all of you afterwards. So please, I have put page numbers on the bottom right. So if there are any specific questions that you do have, just take note of that page and we can come back to that afterwards or when we talk about this later. All right, so some of our key findings. Let's begin with some of the adaptations. We start with the positive adaptations, and I think, of course, the most obvious finding, this was no surprise to us or to Danmission, was that there was the shift from office and field to remote work. This really has determined not only the work in the Mena region, but it's determined everyone's work all over the world with regards to this. This has obviously been our biggest adaptation. And of course, we put it here as a positive adaptation, but it is also a negative adaptation, or an adaptation that has come with many challenges. So I think even before we say positive adaptation, we can just say this has been the most noticeable adaptation. And what we've seen from our 4 partners described to us the shift away from field work or field work only or training only to a new, more hybrid model. It was referred to as a hybrid model, that is combining online activity with some much more limited face-to-face or field work. What we saw was also a big shift from towards more away from face-to-face training to more online training. And we also saw organizations tell us that there had been a real shift and a push towards looking towards organizational priorities much more critically than before COVID-19. And I will talk about this issue a little bit later. It's a really interesting issue organizationally. What we also saw is we saw an increase in the number of meetings. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, well, that's not a good thing, but the organizations were describing to us that it was actually easier to set up meetings, easier to get people together. I think the fact that we're having this webinar with such a wide range of participants today also shows the ease of meetings too. We also saw the continued use of proposal writing. Proposal writing continued, although we did see some issues with grants, which I'll talk about in a few minutes' time. We also saw the rise of importance in administrative staff and support within organizations. So, and that's a really interesting one, and I think a recognition that's probably long overdue from an administrative perspective with regards to work in INGOs and FBOs and CSOs. We also heard reports of improved communications with partners. So because it was easier to communicate, it was easier to set up meetings, organizations also reported improved communication with partners. And then, of course, another adaptation was just the ability to be part of any COVID-19 awareness and prevention campaigns and to assist. And then, of course, was slightly different in different countries, the three different countries, but there was a shift towards being able to be more involved in that kind of work. And then the last page of positive adaptations, we also saw the importance of existing digital platforms and capabilities. What organizations said to us was those who had better online capabilities before COVID found it much easier to adapt to COVID. Those who had less or had more limited digital capacity found it much more difficult to adapt to COVID-19. Organizations also felt that these changes are organizationally sustainable, which is a really interesting finding and a very encouraging finding, because I know many of us all around the world are wondering what happens next, and can we continue working in this way, or are we going to continue keeping some of the ways that we're working now moving forward? And we also heard that organizations feel a lot more resilient after this experience. So having been through this experience, they have really increased their own capacity and their own ability to be more resilient for any other situation that might arise in the future. I think just around long-term impact, I'm just made that point at the bottom. We're just saying I think there were two organizations that mentioned that it might be too early to really look at the medium and long-term impact. So a lot of these positive adaptations that we're describing today, we would describe as short-term impact or micro impact for those of you who are working from an M&E or project management perspective. Right, so one of the quotes was, while it's too early to assess it, it would be interesting to do follow-up study and evaluations of these activities. So I think this will be interesting work, and this is where a lot of our work is coming from now, is organizations saying to us, please help us set up M&E and organizational systems that we can actually track not only what's happened, but what will also be happening in the next 3 months, 6 months, the next year, so that as an organization or as partners or consortiums, we can actually learn from this. So some of our negative adaptations, what we saw here, staff maintenance has been a challenge for some organizations. There have been negative programmatic effects in the sense that some of the previous programmatic focuses have now been challenged by other work or other priorities. Some activities have been paused as a result of COVID. And also some of the non-emergency assistance programs, for example, IRD and peace building, have been paused in favor of the emergency responses related to COVID. And once again, we would expect this, and what we're highlighting here is really what organizations are saying, that this was unexpected, it was unplanned, and actually very difficult to respond to. Another really interesting one, and I think probably one of the strongest findings of this learning review was some of the health risks and some of the psychosocial risks to staff. Here, I'm just going to talk about health risks. I'll come to psychosocial risks a little bit later. And some organizations said even though they were writing proposals, they were able to apply to fewer just because of staff cuts or staff constraints. Beneficiary accessibility was a major issue for organizations as a result of these adaptations. Also complaints that remote technology is less personal, more difficult to really get a sense of how people are doing, how beneficiaries are doing, how partners are doing. And then some organizations also spoke about the negative effects on impact, feeling that perhaps their programs were not operating as well as they were before as a result of these adaptations. So there's a quote from one of the partners: the pandemic has made a substantial fraction of our beneficiary population unreachable. And I think this is really interesting in terms of, the technology, the internet and smartphone. We've not been able to provide these communities with the necessary tools that they need to be in a virtual space. So just the loss, and we're seeing this elsewhere in the world as well, that the less or the more unstable internet and smartphone access is, particularly in rural or more remote areas, the more difficult it is to continue programmatic activities. All right, so the major challenges, I think there was a general agreement that adaptation was difficult. Organizations have also questioned whether they're learning as much. As they say, there might be reduced learning in their beneficiaries and possibly in themselves as well, which is interesting. This need to reevaluate their strategies and priorities has been quite stressful. And it's always very difficult to reassess your strategies and priorities in the middle of a crisis. It's always difficult to find the time to actually sit back and reflect and think about how we're actually going to do that. And then, of course, the absence of government support was also highlighted as a significant challenge in the region. There was limited beneficiary access, as I said before, the big problems of measuring impact, the uncertainty surrounding the future impact, and then significantly, as I said earlier on, the increased staff stress. So all four organizations described to us in great detail how the staff stress had increased as a result of these adaptations and how difficult it was to continue managing staff under these. And I think the three major areas I've put in green there, it's mainly longer hours, that they're actually finding that staff are working more. And that's probably because of this gray zone that we're all experiencing, that you can answer your phone and have a meeting at any time of the day or night now. So those boundaries around when work begins and when work ends have actually been further challenged during COVID-19. And then there's also people described a faster pace. It's not as leisurely. You don't have time to drive somewhere and relax for half an hour before you meet partners or beneficiaries. Now, as we all know, our meetings are stacked up one after the other, sometimes with no break in between. So people actually feel that they're not only working more, but they're working faster, which is a really interesting finding. And then as one of our contributors said, due to the psychological and mental burden that these poses, a number of staff members have expressed feelings of strain, being pushed beyond their psychological and their physical capacities right now. And once again, this is a finding we're seeing all around the world with regards to staff well-being. And we're all looking at how we can actually respond in some meaningful way to the fact that these adaptations have had a negative effect on staff. All right, so learning and sharing, this review also showed the importance of M&E, how M&E is, the importance that it should continue and must continue. And I just put numbers behind you, just in terms of the number of organizations. We had one organization said that they're actually too busy to be learning and sharing right now. Another organization said they're sharing, but not on a formal level. And we had two of our partners saying that they are sharing their experiences with partners. And that shows the differences and the challenges that organizations are having across that. There were no noticeable change in capacity for two organizations. One organization said there were worse changes in capacity, and one organization really highlighted what I said before, this now reliance on administrative staff to make sure that program activities can be delivered and can be delivered. All right. So let's move to the second question. That was the first question in terms of the adaptations. The second series of questions looked at the new emerging discourses and themes. And what you saw there is we saw some really interesting findings here as well. We saw the new emphasis on human rights as a result of COVID-19. We saw the changing role of religious actors and leaders as well, slightly different in different countries, but overall there has been a shift in the way religious reactors are responding to this type of issue, and specifically to COVID-19. Education has been much more closely scrutinized and discussed as a result of COVID-19. Unfortunately, and this links to work that we're seeing everywhere around the world and data coming out of the UN, that SGBV has increased significantly through COVID-19, and was reported during this learning review as well that all four organizations had observed an increase. The changing role of women in families and society, this is a really relevant thing. I was just chatting to Eckhard before we started. For those of you interested, a really interesting UN woman study came out yesterday. You can have a look at, I'll give you the full reference during Q&A. Just looking at the changing role of women non-paid work inside the home has increased all around the world, including in the MENA region. So, which is really interesting. For some people have been saying, well, there've been positive shifts for women and their roles, but there've also been very negative shifts around women's roles, around families and society. And then, of course, the whole issues of discussions of science, belief, and truth, all the conspiracy theories. We've heard them in all three countries, all four organizations. There's some very strong beliefs still about it being produced by government or by enemy governments or forces, and it's very difficult for organizations to work amidst these floating controversies in communities and amongst beneficiaries. So as a quote, many people are still under the impression that COVID-19 is a conspiracy theory and untrue, and this is also very difficult when they don't see government response in response to COVID-19. All right, so some of the effects on the organizations, what we've seen while the new discourses have changed, they haven't really changed the vision and mission, even though there has been an increased focus on priorities. There's been a shift in the target populations and stakeholders. Organizations claim that they are listening more and they are more focused, and there's a greater responsibility. They feel a greater responsibility now towards their target population, which is also really interesting. And this is one of the questions we'll talk about in the panel discussion, but also the effects on IRD. We saw that some said there weren't any really noticeable effects. Other organizations said there's definitely been evidence of a renewed interest in IRD as a result of this. IRD narratives now seem more relevant, and there's been a positive shift in terms of how IRD work and activities are understood as a result of COVID-19 and the organization's responses to COVID-19. So prior to the pandemic in these talks, people thought that our work was more theoretical, but they've now begun to understand the real impact of our work. It was a response by one of our respondents. So just a quick conclusion to those. As you can see, what we see is, these are very difficult times for FBOs and NGOs and CSOs, and to adapt to these new ways of working with these strategies and with beneficiaries who are less accessible than before. I mean, this is, I think, a really significant finding from this learning review. But I think also given these adaptations and challenges highlight that the four partners, with Danmission are really well placed to learn adaptively and continue making relevant and useful contributions to beneficiaries and other stakeholders. And of course, in times of crisis, what we need innovation, and we need creativity, and we need flexibility. And this report really also highlights from these four partners the importance of learning from what you are experiencing and what you're finding. We were having a conversation yesterday, and we were just talking about how some organizations all around the world, some of them, the biggest and most important FBOs now, or NGOs, CSOs in the world, are the ones that emerged out of crises. And I'm based in Cape Town, so a lot of my previous work was involved in HIV and TB. Excuse me, also been involved in the Ebola response. What we saw in health is we saw organizations who were able to learn during these very difficult times are the ones that emerged as being much stronger and much more useful and effective after the crisis had passed. So I also do believe that despite all these difficulties that we found in this learning review, we should not forget the opportunities that something like this presents to all of us with regards to how do we actually improve what we're doing. So that is the overview of the findings. Obviously, these will be available in the report once we finalize that next week. Danmission will, I'm correct in saying that we'll make that report available, and you will be able to look at some more of the details in that as well. This has really been a quick flyby overview just to give you an idea and a taste of what some of the issues were, and hopefully if there are any more questions that come out of your reading from the report, don't hesitate to get hold of us to talk about that in more detail. Okay, so Eckhart, I'm going to switch off this sharing, and I'm going to hand back over to you just for the introduction to the panel discussion, and then I will take over from there.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. You should be able to ask questions from now on anytime through the Q&A button. And then I hope that it works, that we can upvote or downvote the questions that concern all of us, because I expect there'll be many questions and we might not get to all of them. but hopefully this really clever feature will work. Let me know if it doesn't. So before we move into the panel discussion and then afterwards, or seemingly go into the Q&A, let me briefly introduce the organizations, and then the panelists can maybe quickly present themselves and their position and work within the organization. So let me start with FTCD maybe. So FTCD was founded in 2004, and the long name is Forum for Development, Culture and Dialogue, obviously. FTCD builds on extensive experience in community organizing, leadership, training, and response to marginalization and dehumanization, endeavoring to reaching an enlightened Arab world where political views and ethnicities and religions are incorporated into a richly diverse culture of peace and dialogue. FTCD is based in Beirut and today represented by Ms. Dylan Forbes. Hi, Dylan. Thank you so much for joining us. Could I ask you to introduce yourself to the audience briefly?
Yes, hi Eckhart and everyone else. Thank you for that introduction. I am the Peacebuilding and Disaster Response Programs Associate at FTCD. I work a lot on the proposal writing and M&E side, especially in our larger humanitarian programs within Syria and our Danish Arab Interfaith Dialogue, which is a program with Danmission.
Thank you very much. Great to have you. The Royal Institute of Interfaith Studies, RIEPS. Next, it's based in Jordan, and it's a non-governmental organization that provides a venue for the interdisciplinary study of intercultural and interreligious issues with the aim of diffusing tensions and promoting peace regionally and globally. RIEPS was established 1994 in Amman, Jordan. I, as a resident of Amman, Jordan, really enjoy going there on a regular basis. It's under the patronage of His Royal Highness Prince Al Hassan bin Talal, and RIEPS focuses on promoting common human and ethical values that contribute to strengthening cooperation and interfaith relations. And it's today represented by Dr. Renee Hattar. Hi, Renee. So glad to have you. Could you introduce yourself and your role in the organization?
Thank you. A pleasure to be with everyone. At RIEPS, I'm head of international studies, programs, and projects. I also manage proposal writing. I manage all the projects with the other coordinators and colleagues. My work involves both research and applying what we deal with in research in real life, let's say, in order not to stay in the elite, but to take it to the grassroots. So I mainly coordinate all these projects on these two levels. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move to Egypt. CIOS stands for Coptic Evangelical Organization for Social Services, and it's an Egyptian NGO headquartered in Cairo, founded in 1950. Now, Danmission and CIOS have been cooperating since 1990, and throughout CIOS's history, it has played an essential role in supporting good governance and institutional capacity building, in addition to the empowerment of marginalized groups using rights-based approaches to development. It has tackled many vital issues concerning freedom, religious freedom, dignity, social justice, and pluralism, and is today represented by Ms. Irini Makram Samuel. Irini, welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Eckhart.
Again, I'll give you the floor. Just quickly.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm Irini Makram. I work as a senior funding specialist. I'm concerned with proposal writing, and I work also as a grant admin for different projects, including the Leaders for Building the Egyptian Society project funded by DAP.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you, Amy. And we're moving back to Lebanon with Adyan. Adyan is a foundation for diversity, solidarity, and human dignity, registered as an NGO in Lebanon, but works locally, regionally, and internationally, actually, for pluralism and inclusive citizenship, for community resilience and spiritual solidarity through homegrown solutions in education, media, policy, and intercultural and interreligious relations. Adriana has an academic branch to the Institute of Citizenship and Diversity Management, which focuses on the development of thought and skills through courses, training, research, and conferences. He's today represented by Ms. Adriana Budiwan. Thank you very much for joining us, Adriana. And again, I'll give you the floor to quickly introduce yourself.
Thank you for having us. It is a pleasure to be with you in this webinar. I work at Adyan Foundation as a training manager and the program manager. I manage the training projects in the Mena region, and I also work on a local project, a very important one, on women, religions, and human rights.
So much to have you. And in case you don't know very well, Danmission is an independent organization rooted in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Denmark with a history that goes back to 1821. Danmission's focus is on contextual theology for faith and social action, dialogue and peace building, and societal development in 12 countries in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Denmark. And today there is also Stine Balzer Madsen, who joined us, who is the head of our DUP work, and myself, as strategy advisor for the Mena office in Beirut. And with that, I connect to Stephen.
Great, thank you, Eckhart. Thank you to the four panelists. First of all, thank you very much to all four of you for your very rich contribution to the review. So it's been really, really wonderful reading that and going through the data. So the way we thought we would do this, just to create a conversation for about 25 to 30 minutes, is just to look at some of these main themes that came up, and perhaps to get some more insight from our four panelists as to some of these findings, and for them to give us some context and give us a little bit of background to them might be useful. So we thought maybe just to get the conversation started, let's just start with the very high level finding that work has now moved remotely. And let's just hear about sort of some of, you can talk about either challenges or achievements. You know, what has been easy, what has worked, and what has been quite difficult with regards to some of these findings that I presented earlier on. And I'm just going to open it up to anyone. So please, any of the four panelists, please just jump in and give input, and we can get comments and questions from the other panelists before we move on. So anyone would like to begin with some response to what has worked or what hasn't worked with regards to this shift? Maybe it's easier if I ask one of you just to begin, if that's fine. Maybe you can. Rena, did you put your hand up there? Okay, Rena, let's start with you.
Yes, I'll just. Yeah, exactly. I'll just volunteer. I think what you said about the challenges, whether positive or negative, is that since it was easier for us to connect and we didn't have these extra time, which what we usually lost in transportation, for instance, to move from one place to another for the meeting, or to take a rest or a pause or whatever. Since we were working remotely, it was easier to do more meetings. So the communication, I think, among us as team members was much more doubled, I guess. And it's good because sometimes to talk to a senior was much more complicated with the schedules that we had. So the connection now was on the level of team members, but also with seniors and with other team members who we usually could not connect to, was much more closer, I think. So on the positive level, it kind of brought together the team members and the connections, let's just say a bit more than usual. But on the negative level, it was too much also to handle. So as you said, it's a lot of work. So myself, as I manage a team with my colleagues as well, it was hard to care for the mental health and the well-being of the members. So I sometimes call them to say, how are you today? And they're like, is there anything urgent? Is there anything that I didn't do? I'm like, no, I'm just checking on you. Like, with all this that you're doing, are you fine? Because, you know, like they would call me, I don't know if I have allergies, if I have a cold, or it's Corona again. So between doing the tests, being ill, being well, going to the field, oh no, next week, maybe we should reconsider going to the field, because it was always decisions that were made day by day or week by week by the government, by the situation, according to the number of cases. And I'm sure you've all noticed that in Jordan, the first year was perfectly fine for us. There were barely like 8 or 5 cases a day. And we shifted the past couple of months to having 7,000 cases a day, which is absolutely crazy. We have had cases at the office, we had to close down and then, open up again. And then, so the hybrid system of online, offline helped a lot. But when it comes to fieldwork, we've really noticed the difference, especially that all these activities that we do, let's not forget that everyone else is doing the hybrid life. So their universities is online, their work is online, their kids are now online. So to ask them to do some extra activity with us, even if it's for their own benefit, about dialogue, about peace building, about all the topics that we talked about, is also another burden if we ask them to do it online. While if we ask them to escape and come to a retreat and do a program with us like we usually do, it's always another shift for young people, for religious leaders, for everyone who we work with. So I think that was the biggest challenge.
Great. Thanks very much thanks for that, Renee. It was really useful to hear that. I just wanted to make one comment before we move to the other panelists for comments. I've heard this from other colleagues as well, is that the nature of communication is more democratic as a result of remote work, which is really interesting. So we're able to get and speak to people much more easily because now we don't have to go through channels anymore. We just actually send an invite and it goes. So that's very interesting. That's one of the positive outcomes of this. So thanks very much for that. Let's move to any comments from any of the other panelists on anything that Renee has said there, or anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that last bit, Renee. Thank you. You had some great inputs, and I really agree with everything you said regarding the kind of Zoom exhaustion or online, like virtual meeting exhaustion, and the fact that everyone is also doing social life, school, work, everything online. It's totally with you. And but it seemed, I think, also to come in waves. So at some point, like, of course, coming to a conference in person is much more of a retreat and a special thing for people. But I think in some of our experiences with continuing dialogue, with this hybrid online and in person, people still appreciated the chance to participate in something. And I mean, obviously every individual perceives it differently, but that's the feedback that we got, that it did also represent kind of a break in a different way, even if it was online.
Thanks for that, Dylan. I just want to follow up with something you're saying there as well, is just in terms of, are you also just talking about the importance of people saying they found it important to still be connected online? Was that, so I just wanted to clarify something you were saying there. Is that true?
Yeah, the importance to be connected online and to continue dialogue and peace building activities, even if it is in a different mode than we used to do it. The fact that we are continuing it is a real encouragement to faith communities and other organizations and partners that we've heard from.
Great, thanks very much. That's a very important point, because what we've also been finding from other, not part of this review, but from other work that we're involved in, is finding that people are not finding time for their peace building or IRD work anymore. And the importance of continuing to do that, people really do experience it as a gap or as a lack if it's not continued. So thank you for that. That's a really relevant point. Anything from any of the other two panelists on this particular point?
If I can speak now, Stefan, I would like to add to what Renee and Dylan were saying, that we had the opportunity to work from home since day one of the lockdown, or since day one, since the cases started rising in Lebanon. And this was a very important step on the well-being of staff. Staff were less worried to go to the office now because they are working from their home. Of course, there are a lot of challenges with this, but I believe this opportunity that was provided to us by our organization was really helpful. And also, we had an increase in the number of meetings we could do in a day, with whether internal or external with partners. But we missed something very important throughout all of these meetings is the human factor, which I think everything online has gotten us into. However, we missed our colleagues, we missed our partners, and we've of course the interaction in our events. However, I think it's very important to note that it depends on the type of project or event or activity being implemented, if it would work online or not. And also, I think there's a very important learning experience from this, is that sometimes we plan something and we see it in a way or another and we want it to happen this way, but we need to maybe adapt and adapt personally, of course, and as a team in order to achieve this activity, even if it needs to be changed or to be done in a different way. And I think this has helped a lot. This mindset has helped us a lot as a team to go on with our activities and projects.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I just want to clarify there, Adria. So from day one, you went online immediately as a team?
We actually went online since mid-March, before officially the government has declared lockdown in Lebanon, in order to protect the safety of the team. To have everyone safe.
All right, good. Very interesting point there. Good. Erin, do you want to add anything to what our panelists have said before we move on to the next question? Anything to...
Yes, of course. Of course, you know that Egypt haven't been through a complete lockdown through the pandemic. It was only partial. We have moved to working online for almost 4 months, and they were the most difficult working period ever during the pandemic. Of course, we've at the organization stopped. We worked online, and it was, as you have said in your presentation, it was all the time, during the day, during the night. It was overwhelming, although we felt like that we need to be in contact with the grassroots level beneficiaries. So we had to go to the field. Some of our staff have been going to the field to implement local initiatives with the beneficiaries to raise awareness regarding the precautionary measures, social distancing, and provide with even materials to help them carrying out sterilizing establishments, governmental organizations, working with different parties. We have been through this. Also working online within the organization, we have also faced a difficulty whenever we want to finalize official documents with the government or with other donors. It was really hard to get in contact together, because we needed their physical signature. So we had to send papers with cards and so on. So yes, we have faced a lot of difficulties. But I think we're a little bit lucky in this country. So we haven't been through complete lockdown. Yes.
Right, great. Thanks for that, Erin. Very, very interesting there. Also interesting to hear the input around just the difficulty of getting documents together, especially with donors and government as well. I think that's been an issue as well. Yeah. I see, Jasmine, you have your hand up. Would you like to come in, please?
Yes, just a bit. Actually, I found what Renee said in particular quite fascinating, because I know that our evaluation here is how people are managing to work online, but in reality, they have moved into this hybrid model in their entire lifestyles. So even in their personal communication, whether some of your staff is studying and working on this at the same time, and although you can accommodate them being screen exhausted or them being connected all the time at work, there are so many additional burdens that you need to take into account, you know, as employers in the past, and as, you know, members of non-governmental organizations. What happens to your staff after they leave or outside of working hours is not really anyone's problem, right? So we're assuming your staff is resting and that next day they can come to work fully charged, but no one is really leaving that one location on their couch or that one desk where they're studying, communicating with their friends and family, and working all at the same time. So I find that fascinating. And the gray zone that Stephen was talking about is more true than ever. It's not just about answering your work calls anymore. It's about that your life is in the screen, and it's very difficult to manage your work and your screen time and your mental health during this period. I found that to be very interesting.
Can I comment on this?
Please, go ahead.
I really want to agree with Jasmine because immediately after locking the school and closing the schools, my son moved to online sessions, and it was from 8 to 2. And I work as a teacher and as a funding specialist with sales, and it was really exhausting to work. We were doing everything together, and as a mother and as a teacher and everything. It was really exhausting.
Right. Thanks for that. I think this is such an important point. I think we don't even begin to understand how difficult it is for all of us to be doing this. I think this is something we're going to actually understand properly in a year or two's time, once we have some time to look at it and think about it. So, I think what all of you are raising here is extremely relevant. And I think organizationally, we need to put a lot more effort into tracking all of this, all this information in order to allow us to respond appropriately. So thanks very much for that. I would like to move on to a second question. I think we have a really interesting overview of sort of what's changed. I think one of the other major areas for us, and which of course is relevant to your work as 4 organizations and relevant to the work of Danmission as well, is this observation that there's been a shift or a change in the way that religious actors or religious leaders have responded or are working with regards to COVID-19. I'd be really curious to see, and I know there are differences between the countries, so I'd be very curious to hear any thoughts or any responses to what you have seen with regards to this changing role in religious actors and leaders in your communities.
I'll start, Stephen, since
sure, go ahead,
I don't
please.
see any other. Okay, so I think the biggest factor when it comes to religious leaders is, and I'm talking about Jordan, I don't know about the region, it will be very interesting to listen to my colleagues, is the role that we give to religious leaders when it comes to spiritual well-being and ease, since they are people of God, they are closer to the Creator, and so they are the ones who we look to give us more peace and security when it comes to our fear because of the pandemic. So we're talking about different levels of fear. You have mentioned the talk about conspiracy theory and people not believing that it's a virus or that it has been manipulated. Maybe it's just imposed by governments. But there's another group that was really scared, that is still scared. Those of us who have elderly at home, who don't want by any chance to get the disease, those who have kids, those who just fear diseases at all, like some people are phobic against that. So this fear, let's say, was tackled by different people on different levels. And the spiritual or religious level is one of the most important ones, since we still are conservative societies that we can still call more or less religious societies, because religious plays a very important role. So in that sense, we all looked up to the religious leaders who had a bigger responsibility. And when it came, for instance, to different religions like Christians and Catholics mainly started online masses. And I don't know if it were the case in other countries, but in Jordan, many people started having online masses, starting even having the spiritual communion instead of going to mass because of the danger it posed. So on a spiritual level, that was really a big shift for many people, and a big suffering. The idea of not being in a community, because that's the whole idea of going to church to many of them. So to even do that online was painful for many people, was contradictive, was, I don't know, there was this kind of inner conflict, let's just say. Right. And for others, there was a problem with what they considered as their freedom of worship. Like, why should the government prevent me from going to the mosque or to the church while the spas are still open, the gyms are still open? Because, there were different stages of close downs. So who decided what to close and what to open? Is it cafes? Is it restaurants? Is it gyms? Is it health centers? So at each period, there was a certain close down. So the comparison was always done with the places of worship. Is this against my freedom of worship? Is it just to protect me? And we're doing, by the way, RIFS is realizing a study about this that will be released soon in January about freedom of worship in Jordan during COVID. And we have got to very, very interesting conclusions. And of course, the last thing I want to say is this connection between religious leaders and the media. Were they efficient enough during that time? Were they not efficient enough when it comes to the media? Did they do their role? Did they help enough? Or were they not responsible enough? Is it okay for a religious leader to fear going to church or to mosque because they fear for their lives as well? Not to be, not to contract the disease? Or do they have like a more of a bigger responsibility to be in the community? All of these were questions that were posed, I think.
Right, great. Well, thank you. This topic, especially because of my own work in peace building around the world, is really fascinating, because I feel we could probably speak about this probably for the rest of the day, just with the 4 panelists and all our participants. So you've raised some really amazing and really important issues there. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to leave it to some of our other panelists to respond to that, and I will perhaps say something at the end, maybe summarize that. So anyone else like to come in there? Thank you.
Yes, I can.
Please go ahead, Erin.
Actually, when the government started to take the precautionary measures, the first ones who decided to act were the church leaders, Pope Tewodros and Dr. Andrea. They supported the government, and the Azhar even, and all the Islamic institutions. They decided that we are going to support the government, and we are going to take all the precautionary measures required to stop the spread of the virus. This actually was a start for all the people to abide by the rules and by what is stated by the government. And later on, other people tried to object and going in marches and speak about freedom of religion. And actually, through the TV, there was Al-Azhar one time. It stated that it is not allowed for people to do this, and it's considered a criminal because we are infecting others. We are harming others, not only ourselves. So it's important to abide by what the government is saying. This is on the top level. Actually, I think that the government really appreciated what has been carried out by the top leaders, by Dr. Andrea and Pope Tewodros and Al-Azhar leaders did, and now they're involving these organizations in other works that is carried out by the government, and they appreciate the work and the support. On the lower level, on the local churches level, for my church, they started mainstreaming. They started to conduct the service online. It was always managed, and the pastor was there without people. And even the worship team was there and it is mainstreamed on time every day, but without people. On the other hand, we were not for the people. We were not really, I don't know, maybe we are a social population or something. On the online communication regarding the religious issue wasn't attractive for us. I'm speaking about myself. They tried to call people. Some of them were attractive. Some programs were nice, but not all were successful. I think it was new for the religious. They weren't. I have been speaking with the pastors about even Sunday school for my son, because he wasn't encouraged to attend. And in my speech with him, he said frankly that we were not that ready for this unexpected situation. They did an effort, wasn't always successful, but they tried.
Right. Okay, great. Really interesting there on the two levels, initially with the collaboration between religious leaders in government, and then on lower level, some of the greater struggles to actually do that. So really interesting there as well. Other panelists, thanks very much for that. Really very, very useful input there. Any other input from any of the other panelists?
Thank you, Ernie and Renee. Those were both really important contributions. I think, yeah, I would agree about the role of spiritual leaders as providing spiritual encouragement and interpreting global and regional challenges, as Renee said. They have been doing this, but I think it's more relevant than ever now. So it's not really a change in direction in the role of religious leaders, but a ramping up of their importance, especially considering, like in Lebanon, this country is going through so much, interpreting revolution, economic collapse, the explosion in August, and then also COVID-19. So with all these challenges and with the historical role that religious leaders have had and as a, kind of revered for having wisdom and providing guidance, it was tough. A lot of churches in Lebanon went online or were in person intermittently because the government regulations kept changing. Some were using tools like Facebook Live, etc., and were equipped more than previous generations to do this distance spiritual community. It's, not a blessing, but it's a good coincidence that it happened in 2020 when we have so much technology. Still, there, however, there's the access that people have to this spiritual online community and guidance varies, and it represents the disparities that already exist, and it kind of exacerbates that within society in terms of who has internet access or good internet access. I think we're also valuing the roles and voices of youth more and young leaders in navigating this digital sphere and bringing it to their communities. We've seen a lot of young seminary students in Lebanon really active over the past 10 months or so in continuing to push for continuing church activities or mosque activities, but using the online tools that they're already used to as young people, as a very digital generation. Another thing that FTCD's partners, religious leaders do is help with the distributions, act as distribution centers within Syria for the emergency aid. And that has also been ramped up quite a bit. Luckily, they've had, at this point, they know the best practices. They've had their capacity built to, a very professional level, but still existing as churches. It's an interesting dynamic. Again, with the exacerbation of the COVID-19 virus, just making the emergency situation worse. More aid has been distributed, but also you have to provide with that community education because if you're just distributing hygiene packages, it's a lot less effective than also making sure that your constituents in your community know, or your beneficiaries know the severity and what they can do, not only how to use the, what cleaning products there are, but what practices are best for preventing the spread of the virus. So I think that actually religious communities have a niche that works really, really well because they are trusted leaders. And in Syria, they've been the distributors of aid. So it can, combine these two roles in a way that has been really, has worked.
Yeah, no, very interesting. They're very interesting in terms of the role, in terms of distribution as well. Very fascinating issue that as well, Dylan. Good. I see we kind of running out of time with regards to this section, but I would like to give Adriana an opportunity just maybe to respond to this particular issue, and then we will move to the next section.
Yes.
Adriana, anything you want to add?
I agree with my fellow panelists on on the very importance of having religious leaders act fast and using their leadership position in order to spread awareness around the pandemic, despite being in Lebanon, for example, at the beginning and throughout the pandemic, despite the religious leaders taking the right decisions at the beginning to limit exposure to the virus, some people of the community had a lot of negative comments. So why are they stopping churches, like Renee was saying, while other activities are ongoing? Why, for example, this religion has, for example, our feast, we were under lockdown, while others in their feast, they weren't under lockdown. Different sectarian also narrative rose, even though usually the Lebanese community look up to their religious leaders, look up to their different religious leaders and listen But in the corona, this was a bit different, and there was some maybe some disapproval from the community for maybe stopping masses and so on. And I would like to also highlight what Dylan was saying regarding the discrepancy between who has access to internet and not. Even though some of the masses and some of the prayers were broadcasted on TV, but we still realize that those who do not have access to technology and maybe would like a physical presence of a mass or of a Friday prayer missed this opportunity.
Right, right. Good, very important. Thanks very much there, Ariane. Well, I think that, this, as I said, this is a topic I think we could probably speak about probably for the rest of the day or maybe the rest of the week, and a really interesting one. And I hope that we're going to continue having the opportunity to elaborate on your observations and findings over the next few months with regards to these specific issues. We did have other topics lined up, but we really wanted to start with these two to really get the conversation going. I see we're coming up for the bottom of the hour. So what I'd like to suggest is we've got some questions coming in. If the panelists can please just stay with me, because most of these questions are actually addressed to you. So I'm going to just read out the question. And once again, I would just welcome anyone, either put up your hand or just unmute yourself and start responding to some of the questions that have been raised by our attendees. So the first question, Riyad, thank you for your question. The question is, the relationship between the CSOs and NGOs and European partners like Danmission is so unique and important, and the context and impact of COVID is very different in the MENA region from Europe. I'm wondering what the panelists think partners like Danmission can do to support them during this time. So here we're looking specifically at what kind of support do you feel, panelists, would organizations and partners like Danmission give or should be giving during these times?
Don't be shy.
I can start.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
First of all, this challenge is of changing experience and how different countries are working through the pandemic is really helpful. It gives ideas, it helps in exchanging ideas, is really helpful. Actually, Danmission have helped CEUS in directing some of the funds in implementing several local initiatives. But I think later on, the consequences of the pandemic will continue even after it comes to an end with a vaccine or whatever. On the social level, I think women have been through different kind of violence. According to different researchers, even women who haven't been through violence, they experience domestic violence. So helping in designing projects for several issues like stereotyping, violence, stereotyping for the medical staff or who have been working during the pandemic, and people refuse to deal with them, thinking that they are the source of infection.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the psychological effects on children for this pandemic and being locked in homes and studying. I think we have experienced this with all our children, finding other solution other than the technological solution to help them. In the economic level, I think a lot of people have been affected by the pandemic. A lot of people have lost their work or have experienced some kind of loss. I think helping the society to become more resilient and how to face and how to be ready for current or future problems that may arise in the future. We don't know what we might see in the future. This might be helpful.
Great. Ernie, thanks very much for that. I mean, that's very useful. You've given a very comprehensive range of things, and you really are speaking to my heart as well when you're raising all of those. Because I think our programmatic responses are going to be significantly different from now moving forward over the next few years as a result of COVID-19, and you highlighted those. We don't have to hear from all panelists here, but do any panelists like to add to that before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I think that, thank you. Thanks, Stephen and Annie. I think those are good points raised. And in general, it's a hard time to be an NGO, especially I think a local NGO, but also to be, you know, a funding partner, to be anyone in this pandemic. It's a time of real uncertainty. So continuing to have really open and honest communication about expectations from partners is very valuable from our standpoint, about programming and also adjusting everybody needs to be adjusting our expectations. We do, Danmission does, everybody in this team needs to be continuing to expect that it's not going to be stable anytime soon, and understanding what's realistic and what's not realistic. It is a fearful time for our local NGOs because most of our funding partners are also in unstable places budget-wise because global giving is down, and of course, I mean, understandably so, we're in a global pandemic. So I think flexibility and also creativity, like we're all doing now, knowledge sharing is such an important value in this time, considering that, you know, we're experiencing the pandemic and you're experiencing the pandemic, sharing best practices that we've all observed.
Right, yeah, thanks very much. I think those organizational fears, especially around funding in future, are very relevant too. Thank you. Okay, all right. If there are no other hands have gone up. All right, let's move. So thank you for that question. We hope we have answered that. I think it's a very relevant question as well. If we move on to the next question, that's from Ferdinand. Ferdinand asked, being surprised by the finding that there's a new emphasis. I'm sorry, my screen's just jumped. A new emphasis on human rights. I was wondering whether you could elaborate more on this. Do you mean a specific area of human rights, especially since, at least for the Egyptian context, we have rather observed the opposite. Human rights are being seconded to anti-COVID measures. So could any responses from panelists on this before I respond? I think it is different to every country there. I think the finding really was with the renewed emphasis is positive. There's sort of positive and negative emphasis on human rights. That was our finding. So Renee, maybe you'd like to come in there?
Yes, I think we should make the difference between if the work has increased towards these points of human rights, or that just the emphasis that more talk has been brought up about such rights, especially about violence against women and children in the home, because now people are spending a lot of time at home. Many men were out of jobs, some women stayed working, so this created even more violence, domestic violence at a different level, let's just say. You're talking about a lot of time at home, work is at home, teaching is at home, teaching online. Not all family members at times had their screens, laptops or phones. So all of this created domestic violence. So domestic violence came to the level of the fact that everybody's talking about a new problem or a new existing problem, but that took another level. But let's just say not all governments or not all societies took action against it.
Right.
So awareness campaigns increased, work increased, but was it better on that level? I don't know. So that's another point. As we said, freedom of worship, because of all the lockdowns for worship places and all the talk we just had about religious leaders and the role of religion. Another topic was FORB, so freedom of religion or worship, etc. So that was another important topic that came out. As we said about science, faith, and religion, where do ethics play a role? So do we take the vaccination? Do we not take the vaccines? Were the vaccines manipulated? Do they use fetus in the experiments on vaccines? We heard a lot, and a lot was read both scientifically and spiritually, let's say. And we have seen on a higher level many commissions working on this, like the Pontifical Council for Life, etc. So I think that's another top level when it comes to human rights. And I'm sure my colleagues can talk about many more, but I think that the point is, did they come to the surface at a higher level because now we have new challenges, or did we increase our work for these rights? That's the question as NGOs.
Right. Really interesting, very interesting question. Any other comments from other panelists? Thank you, Renee.
Yes, I would like to add to what Renee was saying, specifically on the gender-based violence. And now with being everyone at home, Lebanon has witnessed an increase during the 2020 in the number of domestic violence. It has been officially reported. This has been something very very highlighted with organizations that work on gender-based violence, not specifically us at Adyan, but other partner organizations. And nationally, women were witnessing that they didn't have a place to go. They are, because shelters that provided previously or in the past a shelter for women that would need to go away from home due to domestic violence or for protection, shelters were, due to the pandemic, didn't either have place, or they were unable to take weren't unable to take new people for shelter, new women to put them into safety. And this has caused a lot of pressure on many local organizations. However, I believe that awareness was a lot during this period. A lot of organizations used this pandemic in order to highlight that even though now maybe women are not outside the house, they are inside, and they are witnessing domestic violence. Children are also not that also safe in some places. So it's very important not to hide this or not to discuss it, because usually in Lebanon, women's rights and women issues are never a priority, unfortunately. So whenever there is something, there is always something more important. There is always something better. Okay, we have now an economic crisis. It's not time to discuss women issues, yet it is very important, and it should be on the top of the agenda of everything around.
Right, great. Thank you, Adriana. Very, very useful input there as well. I think something we haven't emphasized enough, it has come through in the learning review as well, is also just violence against children in the report. And that also, that mirrors research from around the world as well, around violence against children having increased during COVID-19. All right, if there are any other comments from panelists, or can we go to the next question? Okay, I think we can go to the next one. Okay, so Ferdinand, I hope that one answered yours. Our next question was around, I was wondering whether the FBOs have felt that they have a new role to play on the more spiritual level due to the pandemic. So just repeat that. I was wondering whether the FBOs have felt that they have a new role to play on the more spiritual level during the pandemic. All right, any responses there from our panelists? Okay, Jasmine, you come in?
I think maybe, yeah, I could a little bit, just of course from the talks that I've had with the different interviewees for this. I have found to a large extent that the role of faith-based organizations and religious leaders in Lebanon, for instance, underwent some kind of an interesting trajectory. So in Lebanon, as we discussed yesterday, did not undergo a very typical trajectory moving into COVID. We started off with civil unrest, with protests, demonstrations across the country, with an ongoing revolution for a few months. And then all of a sudden it was COVID. And then in the middle of COVID, we are then thrust into a huge humanitarian crisis with a huge explosion in Beirut. And so just like every actor, I think faith-based actors and religious leaders underwent this trajectory, and they tried to fit themselves in their capacity with whatever role they find suitable for them. I do find that during the protests, for instance, they were very involved in rallying people around. They were very involved in the messages that they were circulating about peace and nonviolence. moving into COVID, which was more, I think, outside of their comfort zone, which was more of a scientific situation that was taking place, where they maybe felt like they were not quite the authority on this, but still had a duty towards their followers. So I think that interplay was interesting. I would say that their role decreased, if anything. I don't think they found a very new role in that. But interestingly enough, with the explosion and the huge need for aid on the ground and lobbying and activism and being physically there for your constituency, I think their role was renewed. So their role was renewed in being on the ground, helping people out. Arguably, they were there more than any other actors during this time, right? Non-governmental organizations and faith-based actors, they were the ones present and kind of rebuilding Beirut, per se. So because the explosion does intersect with COVID, it's interesting to look at that dynamic, I think. But I don't think COVID was the deal breaker here, at least from what I understood.
Right. There's interesting research to be done there. Wow, that's a fascinating question in terms of the relationship. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Jasmine. They're very good. Any responses to that from the panelists?
Yes, I can add something. I think faith-based organization had the chance during the pandemic to reflect how tolerance and accepting others is something that we can live when we go to a community and help people. People are going to be affected by the COVID-19, whether they were Christians, Muslims, Catholic, whatever they are. So we are serving all. We are presenting love, the love of God, not differentiating between anybody. You are all important. For all the beneficiaries, whatever your religious background is, you are all important. It's important to save you. I think this image of love that we have reflected or have the chance to reflect during the pandemic was important.
Right, thanks very much. Very interesting that as well. That crises like COVID have allowed us to sit back a little bit, despite all the chaos of the meetings and the harder work, but it's allowed us from a sort of the point of a human being and being able to be more empathic perhaps to beneficiary needs. And this is also something we're finding elsewhere too. So very interesting point there, Ernie. Thank you. Anything else from any other ones? Oh yeah, Renee, please.
Yes, Stephen. I would like to add one level that as a faith-based organization, and we have been working for years with religious leaders and with religion all over the place. I think the difference that I saw was the need for spirituality, not religiosity. We had activities like spiritual concerts and workshops with spiritual music, with poetry, with sacred texts. And this level of spirituality is a lot needed at these times. For instance, one of the initiatives that we've had was to answer a call that was launched by the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity, launched by both the Vatican and Al-Azhar, for a prayer day, an international prayer day. And our initiative at RIFS was to call upon all our friends to just send us a prayer in any language. And the videos that were only a prayer or a text, a spiritual text, were the most viewed. People just found some peace and quiet in these messages, much more than discussions and panels and talking about religion or listening to religious leaders. Another panel that we had about saintliness in different religions that we had with the University of Notre Dame also got so many other reactions, because you were talking about the saints, how close they were to God, how spiritual they were, what texts they were writing, composing. So this spiritual level, let's just say, on the human, spiritual, closer to God, rather than religiosity that we usually, let's just say, discuss on an expert level or a religious leader level, is much needed. And I think that is the shift that at least I sensed in all the activities that we were doing in this period, that it's truly needed, and we need to focus more on it. Right. Like talk about love in different religions, talk about mercy in different religions. Right. To go back to the source, to the initial source of all of our work.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure I understood and summarize just the importance of continuing and even to expand spiritual activities and sense of community during times like this. Great. All right, good. Great, thanks very much. That was a very useful, I think, very important point as well. So hopefully, sorry, attendee, hopefully we have answered your question there. All right. Ferdinand, just coming, another question. Can you elaborate on the gendered effects of the pandemic, especially with regards to IRD, and what lessons learned your organization might take from this in the future? So the gendered effect of the pandemic, especially with regards to IRD. I suspect this is another very big question. Probably one we need a little time to think about, but any thoughts come forward? Okay, no one's got an immediate response there.
Oh, maybe I can just jump in here. It's not, and I'm not one of the organizations, of course, but I've been listening in and also, of course, follow the work of many of the organizations. And I remember a conversation I had with Ahmed from ADIAN, where he mentioned that, yes, this gender dimension, just to bring in a new dimension than gender-based violence, but that also that religious leaders now went online, some more experienced than others, and suddenly they were in front of a new constituency, not the normal constituency, the physical one sitting in their churches or mosques or whatever, but people were able to attend in new ways, and also women were able to attend in new ways, and younger women also. So I don't know if that's an experience that some of you also have had in different work or in other matters, and maybe you could elaborate on it, because I think it was a very interesting observation. And I also think what you were mentioning before, Adriana, that the religious authorities were a bit challenged, perhaps also because, new structures, new ways of communicating, new hierarchies, and so on. And also, Mena, I think also in the beginning of the webinar, you mentioned that there's like a more democratic structure somehow. So these things combined, maybe that could be inspirational to talk from that. I don't know if that's helpful, but I would love to hear more about it anyways. Yes. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Stine. That's very useful. Any responses to that?
I would add to what Stine was saying, and it's mainly something that is across all topics. Women maybe witnessed more participation because we are in our region specifically, specific roles are directed to women, and this online experience or having activities being held online provided the space for women to participate more, since they could manage all of their roles all together at once. Maybe, for example, if they have an evening webinar or a webinar during the day, they would not worry about juggling between the taking care of their house, because this is mainly the role. If it was because generally in the region such household roles are designated to women, and I'm not generalizing, I'm just sharing this experience or this point. And this maybe it helped women to take part of the different types of activities and not worrying, maybe less on their mind, so that they would feel more comfortable and ready to take part of any activity without worrying what is waiting for them at home, or maybe what they have to leave to do this. But of course, this is different to different people.
Okay. Very useful. Thanks very much, Adriana. Good, guys. Any other responses to that? We've got one final question. I think we've got about 7 minutes left generally, so maybe we can move to the last question, and then we'll start summarizing. Okay, so our final question. Thanks, Ferdinand, for that last one. The last question is, how concretely have the FBOs worked with tech and innovation during COVID? Any examples? Interesting question, that too.
I can talk about problems we had with Wi-Fi at trips.
Go ahead,
because
really,
you know, it's in the Middle East, everyone knows about old buildings. So if a building was done like 20 years ago, it's already old. So to take care of all the technology, even though we had all the installations, but we had to think twice about all the installations. So we did an extra effort about all the Wi-Fi connections, all our phone connections, making everything like faster, the question was not whether it was working or not, whether it was working faster or not, whether we had enough load or not. And with the help of Danmission, actually, which is another thing to be thankful for, we installed a new system for distance and video conferencing, which of course, usually is a big budget. But since we had some of one of our projects, it was a great investment, let's just say. So this is to answer two questions, actually, what Danmission can do, which is already doing a lot. So it's a good opportunity to say thank you with all the help they're doing. And on the technological level. So it's much easier now that we have a system, with different resolution, different connection to do the meetings when we are at the offices than just the normal Wi-Fi, everyone with their own laptops. So now we can have different let's just say, level of meetings. When you have all the staff with a camera that you can see everyone, So I think that answers one of the technological questions.
Right, great. That's a very nice example. Any other examples from other panelists? Thank you, Ren.
Yes, actually, we use this COVID period and maybe with everyone moving online to enhance our online learning platform. Adyan Foundation has a learning platform, an e-learning platform, www.teachcoexistence.com, and this platform has been ongoing for several years. Actually, it started with a project with Danmission, ADAPT project, the Leaders for Interreligious Understanding project, where we had courses done between Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and Denmark at first, and then Jordan joined. We use this time to enhance this platform to make it maybe have more courses or more resources available and more community of practices available for people to access in relation to topics related to inclusive citizenship, freedom of religion and belief, diversity management, and other topics related to our work. So the platform is fully ready for people to enroll in courses or to use the resources available.
All right, great. Another great example. Good. Thanks, Adriana. Any other comments from any others?
Yes, for sales, we for the country all moved to online. So of course in the country there was a traffic through the online. However, sales was ready. We immediately shifted to online. We had a Zoom account, and we started to have a Teams account directly after starting the pandemic. The real issue that we have faced was with the beneficiaries. When we started to conduct virtual meetings, not everyone had smartphones, not everyone had computers, so this was difficult to continue with the meetings and so on with the final beneficiaries, and even the connection at these places. And when we have solved and gone through this, we faced a problem with the mobile data, the charge of the mobile data. So we have tried to deal with all this, and the issue of the charging the mobile data, we have dealt also with Danmission, and they helped us to transfer some of the money to charge the data of the beneficiaries to continue with the virtual meetings. So.
Right, good. Thanks very much. Another very practical, especially with regards to beneficiaries there. Okay, good. I think if there's nothing else, perhaps we've answered all the questions. So hopefully the last person, hopefully we've answered your question. All right, there's no more questions, I see. So thanks very much. From my side, thank you to the panelists for your contributions. It's been really interesting and very useful. And this is one of those times you wish we could all go off for tea and coffee and continue talking rather than ending it online. But thank you very much for your very rich and helpful contributions. And thank you to all the attendees for those questions. I think they were very interesting questions and very provocative questions as well, which allowed us to think about some other aspects too. So from my side, I'm going to say thank you, and thank you for your time. I'm going to hand back over to Eckhard just to close and to summarize. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you to all the attendees. I must say, sometimes I've been wondering, are we asking too much? Are we draining too much of your time during these challenging times where it's very busy with things you didn't ask for? But and I can say we're extra grateful for the time you made for the interviews and also today for the webinar, because I feel very strongly this is a conversation that has been very, very worthwhile having, because the pandemic is staying, the pandemic itself is staying, and the consequences are staying, and so are the challenges and also opportunities, I think. And it's always very, very vague to say it won't be the same as it was before, but it surely won't. And it's a big discourse unfolding right now, and it's just great to be in this together with great colleagues and friends, and trying to wrap our head around these challenges and how to deal with them. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Stephen and Jasmine, for hosting this and for writing this report. I put my email in the chat box there, so email me if you want to receive further material. I think we can make the PowerPoint available quite easily, and also the full report once it's finished. And I wish you a very good day. I know there was a slight misunderstanding, by the way, whether this is 2 hours or 90 minutes. The answer is 90 minutes, and we are done right now. And thank you to the panelists, and thank you also to your organizations for letting you use your time in this way, and for giving us your time once again. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eckhart.
Thank you.
Yeah, God, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.